Hi, this is Rochelle with Live in Vibrancy, and I am continuing the one of two videos that I'm making on levels of consciousness, which are the intro videos into a series I'm doing on embodiment work and why it is very likely the missing key if you are struggling to manifest something into your life. Okay, so starting with levels of consciousness. As I mentioned, we start as infinite awareness and we begin to identify with self in this first level of consciousness. And level one is the victim mentality. At this level, you experience life through the lens of life is happening to me. And this happens because essentially we're conditioned into this as children. Children are very vulnerable, and in essence, life is happening to them. So this is the level of victim and blaming. People and circumstances stop me from being happy or stop me from having what I want. And essentially, when in this level of consciousness, we're creating our reality, but it's mostly unconscious because our beliefs are essentially that life is happening to us, and therefore life is happening to us. And so this level can often be very frustrating because it creates a looping cycle of past experiences and painful perceptions and of essentially ourselves and of the world. And so the emotions that are attached the emotions I guess that are experienced in this level are most consistently in the range of sort of like lower, like more dense emotions. So guilt and shame. There will be sadness, apathy, fear, doubt. And so if you're here, you are most likely, you feel like you're trying and you may even feel exhausted. And often when creating, results are they're limited, if at all. Some people really struggle to create anything. And it has to do with sort of not just what they're thinking, but the combination of thinking and feeling. And so, and it creates this feedback loop, as I mentioned, or it essentially is the result of the feedback loop. The feedback loop tends to always be there. We're not creating the feedback loop. It just depends on how you're experiencing it. And so this feedback loop really just reinforces this sense of limitation, these limited beliefs and low vibrational emotions, because you're having these negative experiences, which are through the feedback loop, are really sort of feeding well, actually, I said that backwards. So essentially, you have a negative emotional response and perception to something, which then creates the feedback. And so something external reflects your beliefs and your emotional state. And then you experience that. And so it's like this thing is happening to me. I feel like I really garbled that up. But basically, hopefully that made sense. If not, let me know, and I will try to explain that more clearly. So people at this level of consciousness tend to be overly identified with the limited aspect of their physical self. They may try to force new thinking while emotionally identifying with their limited thoughts. They can be easily seduced into the story they're telling themselves that matches those like more dense emotions. The types of thoughts that accompany the victim level of consciousness is, this is how it is, this person will never change, this is never going to get any better, I can't change it, I'll never do or have better, I hope this works. That's sort of where they like top out in positivity around what it is they're creating. They're really hoping it's going to work. And so there's often a subtle or unconscious sense that something outside of you has to save you. And we all slide into the victim consciousness at one point or another. I just caught myself having several conversations over a course of period of time, and I was being like the mayor of victim land. I was the victimiest victim of all victims. So, I mean, I'm not saying this to be triggering or judgmental, but in that moment, I recognized, oh, this is why I'm getting these results that I'm getting. This is why this experience is so difficult. And it wasn't the experience, it was the level of consciousness that I was in. And so it is essentially the level of consciousness that is primarily connected to living unconsciously. I mean, essentially, when your whole unconscious self is it's designed to keep you alive. And so essentially, when something is sort of operating from the place of it needs to keep you alive, it's sort of operating from the sense that at any moment you could be a victim and that the world around you is potentially working against you. And so the more that you're able to let go, the more you're able to live in presence, the less you'll find yourself in the lower levels of consciousness. That is one of the ways that you begin to level up. And so before I forget, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and stay to the end of this video because I'm going to continue to give you tools like practical tools that you can use to begin if you recognize yourself even part-time, because I don't think we're never in any one level of consciousness all the time. We essentially will move. You're just going to have one that you're in more primarily. Okay, so maybe the victim level, some people can be in there primarily, and that is essentially because they are really identified with their limitations. But once you hit that second level, you'll be able to move your way up, and even once you get to the highest level of consciousness, you can oscillate your way down. Anyway, that's so the second level is empowerment. And so this is the level where you begin to realize or recognize that you create. At this level, you're more conscious. You tend to believe more manifestation is happening by your conscious mind, though, which is, I've said before, this is the most limited aspect of your mind. And so conscious manifesting can feel like a lot of effort. There is a lot more like affirming and techniques and flipping thoughts and whatnot. And for some people, this works because essentially, as I've mentioned before, the only difference between someone who can make a technique and someone who struggles to make a technique work is their energy. And so in level 2, you're more empowered than you are in the first level of consciousness. You know that you're not your thoughts. But there's often this energy of like pushing or control or making something happen. And so you may get some results in some areas. And sometimes it might feel like a lot of work, whereas other things will be really easy. And you might even find that it's not consistent or that you can lose it just as quickly. And in level 2 consciousness, you can still be seduced by your own stories. The emotions attached to your manifestation tend to be more around happiness and gratitude, but there are mixed emotions in there. Some of the lower emotions that I mentioned, maybe even desire or wanting. There can be anger and resentment and emotions sort of in that area. But you oscillate more between those and like a higher level emotion. Unlike level 1, where you tend to have sort of this sense of hope, but this underlying fear or doubt. So you step in and out of consciousness and unconsciousness, like consciously living and unconsciously living in level 2. And you're most present in your life when you're actively manifesting something, but often For people in level 2 consciousness, once it comes in, you might slip back into unconscious living. And this is when those lower emotions will emerge. And what often happens is people's manifestations unravel. And so again, this is not to cast judgment. I lived for like, I would say in level 2 consciousness for years. And I manifested a lot of amazing things. And I also had things I really struggled with. And so basically, if you can recognize yourself in level 2 consciousness, the purpose of this video is not to depress you. It's to give you sort of a sense of recognizing maybe where you are and then give you some tools to make some changes. Okay, so the third level, this is surrender. So this is where essentially you realize that your conscious mind, while powerful in its own right, is not the operating force in the universe, that manifestation is actually happening through you. The universe, God, source, whatever, essentially works through you. You recognize in level 3 that you're not powerless. That you are essentially the conduit, and you don't need to work so hard. And so there's a lot less trying to be in control and a lot less of getting in your own way. And so you're able to align to your desires and just surrender to a greater aspect of yourself. And so basically the kinds of emotions that you will tend to experience more often are going to be like sort of a sense of peace. You can come into you can let go more easily. There's willingness and acceptance. And here is where you're going to find yourself often in heart-mind coherence, right? You're able to quiet the mind and let the heart really take over and live from intuition. Because essentially intuition is like subconscious knowing. And so the subconscious is a greater mind than the conscious mind. And so this in itself takes a lot of courage and awareness, because you have to be able to be aware of and not identify with any of your limiting stories. Because you're human, and thoughts and feelings are still going to happen no matter what level of consciousness you're in. The level of consciousness just essentially is implying that there is space between you and your trigger. And so you're not seduced as easily by the allure of the old limiting stories or facts based on past experiences. So the fourth level of consciousness is enlightenment or awakening, or there's a lot of things that they can call this. But essentially, this is where you really can come to a space of you realize that everything exists in this moment. There's nothing to fix or change. Because the moment you observe a problem, you've essentially collapsed the wave into a problem reality. And so trying to change it, essentially trying to manifest something different, just reinforces the problem, because you're focused on the problem and it keeps it in place. Simply by the mental and emotional focus that you place on it, right? What you focus on expands. And so when you are at this higher level of consciousness, some people at this level will essentially refer to themselves as like, I am God, I am infinite, whatever. And this is what it is. There's no need to resist current experience, because there's nothing to fix or change. Because taking your attention off the problem and putting it on the solution is essentially how you're effectively manifesting. So, but when you're in this fourth level of consciousness, you recognize, and there's not as much forcing. You recognize that life is not meant to be perfect. It's exactly as it should be. And that you're willing to be here for all of it, both good and bad, because you recognize that that's a very dualistic way of looking at it, and that everything just is. Everything in life is happening as you and for you. And that you're far greater than the limits of your egoic conscious mind. And so based on law of polarity, this level is as close to oneness as we really will get in this dualistic physical experience. And so, as I mentioned, some people will call this enlightenment. And it is just as easy to be in level 4 and drop down to level 1. So again, level 4 does not make you better or different. You're just in a different state. These are all essentially, I'm just sort of describing states of being. And these are not the only 4. I've just really created like 4. These are kind of the primary 4 that they talk about. But by all means, is this not the only 4? Because we have many states of being, but we don't have all night for me to go on and on. So anyway, in the 4th level, you're really to experience, you don't look at your challenges as challenges. You look at them as, you're often grateful for them. There is a beauty in contrast because you recognize that it is here to expand your consciousness through each challenge, not identify with it or resist it. And so this is when manifesting becomes very easy because you have very little resistance. And most people don't spend a lot of time in this level of consciousness. Just to be fair, this really requires you to become conscious in your life. And so at this level of consciousness, you really begin to truly understand what it is that you're capable of. And if you're not challenged to overcome, how are you going to really know? Right? If you could do it without challenge, you would feel pretty like meh about it all, right? You wouldn't do it. There's no satisfaction in solving a Rubik's Cube if it's essentially, like taking the lid off this. And so right now, if you're in a lot of mental or emotional pain or struggling to create what you want, I recognize that the idea of being challenged to get what you want probably doesn't sound like something that's going to bring you satisfaction. But this is the sick irony of the universe. You can have it when you're willing to stop struggling. I know, it's enough to make someone's conscious mind go, trust me, it's made mine do that. But at this level of consciousness, love is more present, and you are more conscious in your life. And so you are consciously generating emotions of peace, which I guess could be related to what I often call neutral space. It's sort of this expansive feeling, and there is no resistance there. Love, happiness, gratitude, and you do experience all the other emotions, but they don't sort of taint the lens through which you see your own limitations or your own capabilities, or what you can and cannot have. And so you're able to move through life without really getting hooked in the circumstances. And as you sort of begin to shift through these any of the blocks that sort of keep you calibrated in any level of consciousness, there are a couple of stages that you might go through. So the first stage of change, you're in the first level of consciousness, right? This is where I was when I was like the mayor of victim land a few weeks ago. And you're really identified with your thoughts. You believe like that mean and pessimistic voice of doubt in your head, and you think that it's you because it sounds like your voice, right? And so the sort of thinking around this is I am my thoughts are me. And so that you... when people are in this level and begin to shift, they start with this sense of like life is happening to them, and they tend to be very unaware that it's your patterns and beliefs that are really creating your experience. And I lived in this stage for the majority of my life. This is where a majority of the world is, because they do not realize that they have the capacity to expand beyond who they believe they are. So then stage two happens when you begin to realize that there are patterns of emotions and patterns of perception and patterns of behavior that keep you stuck and oscillating, that keep you from keeping you from having what it is that you want to have in your life, what it is you want to create. And this stage can often be really frustrating because people will begin to see that there is a pattern, but they will not necessarily be able to recognize what it is, and they will often not know what to do with it when they do. And I lived in this level in certain areas of my life for a decade, frustrated and trying all kinds of things that did not help. So again, no judgment. That's not the purpose of this video. So as you move into this third stage of change, this is when you begin to create space between you and either the things, your perceived limitations or triggers, so that you can begin to see them as they come up, right? And you will have learned how to create space between you and whatever blocks you from creating what you want. And you will have developed tools to begin to move through the blocks because you cannot bypass them. Our tendency is to try to want to go around it, to get rid of it. But the only way is through. And so at this level, right, as you begin to shift into a new stage of consciousness, and you begin to be really step more into your expansive self, you're more conscious in your life. And so you really are no longer seeing yourself through the unconscious lens that you essentially came into adulthood with. And you may experience the thoughts and feelings that you did at level 1, but you're not identified with them. And you have the tools, as I said, to really clear them or move through them to clear them is what I should say. And so it's important to recognize that we see life through this lens of feeling and narrative. And it's these deeply held feelings that affect the narrative of the lens. Thoughts are essentially generated by a feeling state. Yes, thoughts also create emotions, but considering that 95% of your life is dictated by the subconscious, and the subconscious is the body, just by simple math and logic alone, we can see that 95% of your thoughts are actually stimulated by something going on in your body because there is always something happening. And your brain is on high alert. So essentially I've spoken about this before, it bypasses your cognitive functioning because that's how you conserve energy. It's a lot faster if you need to run away from a bear, if you don't have to stop and think, is that a bear? And so thinking actually utilizes a lot of energy. And so a lot of the thoughts that you think have triggered the feeling, it's actually gone the other way. And so anyway, that's me getting onto another topic or skipping ahead. Anyway, so but my point is there's a vast overestimation of the power of the mind over the body, especially when they are incongruent. Because you can think one thing and your body can continue to operate on autopilot in complete opposition to those thoughts. And essentially, you want to be able to get them to be working together because, and again, I'm not going to jump ahead and really break this down so that you understand the importance of embodiment work and how, what a difference it can make. But instead, I'm going to, I'm going to stick to the topic and give you something tangible. So that instead of looking through the lens as yourself, which you do in the first level of consciousness, I want you to be able to widen the view so that you're no longer looking through that lens, or at least you're learning to begin to look beyond that lens, right? So that you're no longer looking through the lens, you're looking at the lens itself. And so I want you to choose something. And I want you to start with the question, what would I have to believe to have this experience? And I want you to choose a positive thing in your life and a negative thing in your life so that you can get a sense, because often we're willing to claim beliefs that we have about positive things and maybe not so willing to claim beliefs we have in the negative range. And so in order to give you better perspective, I want you to look at the two. And then I want you to question why do I view it this way? And for each thing, write these down. It's often, we can get a lot more perspective when we write things out, when we get them out of the mind. And so, because in the mind, we lose a bit of perspective. Anyway, so I want you to also then consider what feelings and stories come up around the beliefs, right? The reasons that you see each thing, positive and negative. And then I want you to, for both of them, positive and negative, ask the question, what else could this be? And I recommend, if you are looking to identify a belief, a negative belief, you want to sort of align your emotional state to whatever you want the outcome of this exercise to be. Because your emotions color the lens of perception. So if you look at a negative thing and you ask, why do I believe this? And most likely, based on the feedback loop, you're going to pull evidence from your past and you're going to make a conclusion about that. And then when you ask, what else could this be? If you are in a lower emotional state, you will struggle to be able to find a different meaning. But you're in a more positive emotional state, you will be able to look at it differently. Because emotions essentially color the lens of your perceptions, and emotions affect us at a greater degree than previously known. And so you actually, I've said this before, you will not think greater than you feel. You will not accept new ideas or beliefs when you're in a lower emotional state than is aligned with those ideas. And so you will not be able to see something to create a more positive meaning if you are in a lower emotional state. Okay, so I would really love to hear your experiences with this exercise. If you have any questions about this exercise specifically, please put them in the comments along with any comments about your experiences. I'm really interested to see what you can find. Anyhow, and I hope these videos are helpful as we move through this series on the power of embodiment work. So this is the very first section, and until next time, live like you can't fail.